Hi, lovelies. It is your host here on the Raw Chatter podcast, Vicky Midwood, health, nutrition, fitness, and lifestyle coach, and of course, the addiction eliminator and fabulous health and freedom creator. And I want to say, woohoo, I'm celebrating 18 years alcohol free this bank holiday weekend. Now, if you are listening in another country, this weekend is our bank holiday. There is the one that falls at the end of May. And if you're in America, it also coincides with your Memorial weekend. So it's quite a significant weekend, I think, for a number of countries for various different reasons. For me, it's kind of doubly so because it spells the end of my weird, horrible battle with alcohol. Now, what it also did was renew my issues around other things, around sugar and caffeine and exercise, but it did eliminate for me the desire to participate in alcohol and the need, the compulsion, and the obsession to have it daily. And so I've shared on social media about how that happened, a little bit about that story, and how I believe that the universe stepped in to help me to do what I could not do for myself. And so this is what I want to talk about on this podcast, and the power to change. Because what I want really to get across to everybody is, and for those people who made comments on my post this weekend and said, well done for making that choice. And I had to say, actually, I didn't make that choice. It was something bigger than me that made sure that the stars aligned for things to happen the way that they did. It certainly was not orchestrated by me, and it certainly wasn't orchestrated by any other human that I know of, which is why I don't have a problem in believing in a power greater than myself, because wanting to not drink anymore, wanting to not have alcohol be my very first waking thought and my very last thought before sleep or passing out, whichever came first, was something that I really had by that point given up any possibility of ever achieving, and was trying to work out how I could kill myself and my daughter and ensure that neither one of us would survive, because that would have been absolutely disastrous. And I toyed with so many different things, but there was always that fear, what if she survived and nobody was there to look after her and she ended up in care? I just couldn't do that to her. She didn't deserve it. But also, what if I survived and she was dead? I don't think I could live with that either. And so I was in a mess in terms of where I was in my life. I'd lost work as a fitness instructor. I'd left some places because I wasn't happy. But the final straw for me was when I was actually brought in and asked to have a conversation with the manager of one of the clubs that I did quite a number of classes in. And he said, I'm really sorry, but there's been complaints about you, and you appear to be under the influence of alcohol, and people can smell it on your breath, and I'm sorry, but that's a sackable offense. And I had to take it. And that really took me into a spiral of honestly believing that there was no way out. I had no clue. The only way I could see was to get rid of myself and my daughter and just end it all, because I had nothing left. I had nothing left to be here for. My parents had pretty much disowned me. My mum was very much being looked after in an old person's home. She's no longer with us, neither is my dad. And they kind of let me know that they couldn't do any more to help. And that I was pretty much on my own. And I felt like that for a very long time. Now, I'm going to fast forward a little bit from that weekend, because I've shared that was what happened. It wasn't my choice. Now, of course, I went into rehab, and that was thanks to a GP who spotted that I was going through some serious withdrawal issues that, unfortunately, a few hours in A&E and in a hospital hadn't picked up on. But I was in rehab, and I think a lot of people think, well, rehab and that's it. Great. And you're all sorted. It's not that straightforward at all. And I had to do a lot of changing. And this is why I shared this part of my story in the book, Women Thrive. Inspiring true stories of women who overcome adversity, because my story was not just plain sailing. I didn't stop drinking, thank you, power of the universe, and go to your rehab, and then my life kind of all fell into place. That is not how it panned out at all. There was a lot of work to do. There was a lot of getting to know myself and getting to discover just who I was. And a lot of what I discovered about me, I did not like. I did not like some of my traits. What I didn't understand fully back then, and I do now because of doing a lot more work and working with others, is that I can create who I am. And I can do that by getting really truthful and honest about my beliefs and recognizing that we all have a dark side and we all have a light side. We also all have certain personality traits. We all have a human design. We all have an astrological chart, and we are all energetic beings. And if we only look at one or two things, then we're missing out on a whole big picture. Now, I understand that everything is energy. How we think and how we feel is programmed, and it's been programmed from parents, from their parents, so from grandparents, from rest of the family members, from school, from what we hear on TV, from conversations that we are open to. And I'm fully aware that all of this stuff is happening while we are still embryos in our mummy's tummy. How our mum was through pregnancy has a massive effect on how we are going to be as humans. It will affect our DNA and our mRNA. And also it is going to affect how we cope and manage and what things that we associate with what in the world. So when I ended up in the space and place that I did, it was because of a number of reasons. And a lot of those were to do with my value system and the belief systems that actually weren't mine, that I'd picked up from parents and from schooling and from everybody else, and the social conditioning that we all are kind of subjected to, whether we like it or not, including the social conditioning and the stigma around any addictive issues. And this crazy idea that somebody chooses to be addicted to anything is just that, a crazy idea. The idea that you can just stop just like that and it be so simple and straightforward is also a crazy idea. I did just stop drinking, right? Not through choice, though, through circumstances put together by a power greater than myself. I call it the universe. That's what I choose to call it. I don't believe in a religious God. I'm not a religious person. And if you are, then go for it. If the term God works for you, use it. Or any other kind of religion that you are a part of, and your God has a different name, use that. But I'm not religious. I'm not going to go down that road as to the hows and the whys. But I just think that it's just a way of controlling people, and it's not my bag. So I choose to believe in something bigger than me, which is the universe. Because when I look at any kind of picture of us as a planet, and I look at all the other planets in the universe, it's pretty damn big, right? It's definitely more powerful than I am. It's probably a little tiny dot or speck of dust on the landscape. So the power of the universe stepped in, and I did just stop. Stupid, ridiculous, crazy thing to do. Could have ended up with a wet brain, or worse, my heart could have just stopped. Right. And that was the fear when I was in rehab, that is exactly what potentially was going to happen, that physically my body just couldn't handle the withdrawals, because it had become so used to that intravenous drip of white wine and beer that it had had for over a decade. And that was for people are always interested, and I didn't put it in my chapter of the book. I didn't talk about how much I drank or what I drank, because I don't think it's necessarily helpful to give amounts, and especially when I talk about addiction. People ask me about, well, what do you eat now, and what did you eat, or what were you not eating when you were, in the depths of your eating disorder and stuff. And it's the same with alcohol. I know that when I read a book a long time ago on anorexia. It's from that book that I learned how to get even better at being bulimic. So I'm really aware that too much information can potentially make somebody a lot worse in their addiction than they would have necessarily gotten on their own. So I'm very mindful of that. So suffice to say, spirits were not my drink of choice. Alcohol and beer was. And when I stopped, it was not through choice. It was through something else. Call it circumstances if you don't like the term power greater than yourself or universe. But it meant that I stopped. Now, was it my choice to stay stopped? Yes, of course it was. But here's the thing, and this is the bit that I share in that book chapter, is that the actual desire and the compulsion had also been taken away. And that is something that honestly I cannot explain. There is no way that before that weekend 18 years ago, I could have made a decision not to drink and abstained from it for even as little as 4 hours, because that's all it took for the withdrawal symptoms to kick in. If I stayed away from it for that long and then not be thinking about it all of the time, I didn't know a time when that hadn't happened, but yet here I wasn't thinking about it. Now, was it because I was in rehab and there was just too much going on? Was it the fact that I couldn't get my hands on it anyway? No. But here's the thing, in rehab, you end up talking about alcohol all the flipping time. You also talk about your feelings and you talk about all kinds of other things too. That is absolutely true. But alcohol was often the topic of conversation. And this is where, I didn't realize until, later, that actually throughout that whole period, there wasn't one time, there wasn't one day, there wasn't one thought where I thought, oh, I'm missing it, I would like it. That did not happen. The only time it felt strange, and I'm using that word on purpose, it felt strange. It wasn't uncomfortable and it wasn't hard. It was just different. Was in the second rehab in South Africa when we all decided to go out for dinner, for an evening meal. Now, we hadn't done that. Most of the evenings were spent going to AA meetings or NA meetings or various other anonymous meetings. And that's kind of what we did with our evenings. And we would usually eat before we went within the shared house that we had. But it was a weekend, and I think it might have been a bank holiday type of weekend where there wasn't as much going on. And we decided, a few of us, that together, because it would be better to do it together and better to do it before we all left and went home, to go to a restaurant. Now, part of our group, one of the ladies had been training to be a sommelier. And for those of you who don't know what that is, a sommelier is somebody who is an expert in wine in a restaurant and buys wine. Sometimes they work for wine producers and wine sellers that supply restaurant chains. And sometimes restaurants have specifically sommeliers working in there who will recommend the wines that will go with the food that you have chosen from the menu. So she was training to be that. So you can imagine how it felt for her to be going into that world, that arena, and knowing that she wasn't going to be pairing any of her food with any wines at all. I'd also come from that restaurant background too. And so it was, hand in glove, fish and chips. It was, these things go together. And so to go to a restaurant and not look at the wine list, and when it was offered to say, no, thank you for the whole table, it was different. That's all I'm going to say. But I wasn't looking around at the tables and seeing the glasses of wine on tables and thinking, I wish I could. That just didn't happen. Now, that is something that I cannot explain, except to say it was something bigger than me that removed that whole obsession. And I am so grateful and I am so fortunate that happened. Would that have happened anyway if I'd have gone to AA and worked through the steps, as I have done subsequently? I honestly can't answer that. But what I can say is that I have helped people through the 12 steps, and they have also found that the compulsion and the desire and the whole obsession with it is lifted. And that's what it says in the book of the 12 steps of AA. It does say that we were recovered, that the desire and the compulsion had completely been removed. And that's why later on down the line, when I was well into 2 or 3 years of being completely a non-drinker, and that, by the way, is how I refer to myself now. If anybody asks me, I just don't drink. So I'm a non-drinker. I just don't drink. I don't say I'm a recovered alcoholic. It's irrelevant. Does it make any difference to anybody? Absolutely not. Does it make me feel good to say those words? No, I hate the term alcoholic. I think it's unnecessary. And if you listen to the episode on labels, you'll know that the only time I use that word is when I'm talking about my story, because it's not helpful, I don't think, to anybody. But the point is, recovered. But whilst I was then learning how to live, there was a lot of change that I needed to do. And that is where I found that it was very, very helpful to believe that there was something bigger than me that was helping me. And this is where the 12 steps of AA came in for me. Now, does everybody have to go down that road? Absolutely not. There's a lot of misunderstanding about AA. And I had this, hands up. I thought it was a bit culty. I thought it was all about religion. When you read the steps, and if you go into any kind of anonymous meeting, and they're usually up there on the wall so you can read them, you can see that there is it says God, and it says power greater than myself. And immediately your brain goes to God squad, religion, culty, right? And I get it. Mine did, to some extent, until I understood that it just had to be this belief that there is something that's not you that is able to run the show. And what we now know, and people are much more open to this now, is that they understand about the power of the universe. They understand about reciprocity. They understand about energy and manifesting and all of that good stuff. And so I think more so now than ever, people are open to this idea that everything is energy and vibration, and the words that we choose to use and the thoughts that we think all play a massive role in how we feel, how we behave, and the beliefs that we hold. And so the power of change for me, and this is why I called this episode The Power of Change, is really about the words that I choose to use. And if you've read any of my blog posts, if you've listened to other podcast episodes, or if you've read any of the stuff where I talk about changing language, and even if you've been onto my website, which is vickymidwood.com, I actually have a video there of the BLAST method to fabulous freedom that I have created. And the L in BLAST stands for language, because it is massively powerful. And if we can change the words that we use, if we can change the association, the perception, the interpretation of the words that we use, then we all have much more power to change than we believe. Now, I've actually written an article and a blog on my website this weekend about the word hard, because so many people, recovery is hard, change is hard. Well, here's the thing. If you say it's going to be hard, it will be. Because what we think about, we bring about. And the words that we use are like a program to our brain. So every time you say hard, it's going to be hard. It will be hard. Oh God, this is so hard, right? Your brain is going, okay. It's like you're setting up a request. You want it to be hard. Excellent. I will make sure that that is indeed what you get. You see, your brain wants to give you what you say you want. It takes instructions from you. And one of the things that I do when I help all of my clients, whether the issue is anxiety, whether it is guilt and shame over emotional eating or binge eating, whether it is alcohol dependence or addiction, or all of those things, if we can recognize that we are programming our behavior via our brain. It helps you to recognize that you actually have much, much more control over things than perhaps you believe, because we can change the programming. And anybody who has done any work on manifestation will understand that it's about the words that we choose to use and how we can reframe. If you've done NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, we reframe how we think about things. When it comes to what we do around alcohol and food and anxiety and keeping addictive type cycles going, it's very much due to the fact that we keep repeating the same thoughts, which bring about the same feelings, which then result in the same behaviors. It may well be that it's the other way around, that we do these behaviors that create feelings that then reinforce the thoughts. And so we genuinely believe everything we think is true. But a belief, honestly, is just a thought that you keep on thinking. And that's it. You are the thinker of your thoughts, and you can choose the thoughts that you think. Now, I'm fully aware that sometimes it does not feel like that. But if we keep saying the same stuff, particularly if we say it out loud, if we're having conversations with other people, it's like we are really kind of firing and wiring even more solidly. We're reinforcing this same message. And what we got to take on board is that your brain is not hearing the words "I don't." It hears the thing that you are talking about. So if you are saying, "I don't want to drink, I'm not going to think about drinking," well, we've just said the word drink and drinking twice. And that's what your brain hears. So guess what? You're going to be always aware of and always thinking about drinking, because you keep thinking about it. Even if you're saying, "I'm not going to think about the thing," you've said the thing, you're already thinking about the thing. It's the same around money. The amount of people who talk about, "Oh my God, I feel so broke. There's what's the terminology? There's too much month left at the end of the money." Well, the more you repeat that, guess what? The more that is going to be your reality. There will always be too much month left at the end of the money. Why? Because you keep saying it, because you keep thinking it, and therefore you keep believing it. Now, I know you're going to turn around and go, "Yeah, but I can prove it. I've got the evidence." And I'm going, yeah, well, that's partly what your brain does to help you to keep on believing the thoughts that you think. Therefore, you can keep doing the same stuff and believe that change is hard. Why? Because there's one thing and one thing only that your brain wants, and that's for you to survive. And it does that by making sure that you keep on doing the stuff that makes you feel calm and relaxed, that is familiar. And so I did a blog about things being hard. Now, oftentimes we use that word because we're talking about stuff that's just unfamiliar, right? It's new to us. So of course it's unfamiliar. And your brain goes, "Oh, I don't know this. I don't know what to do with this." Don't do that. Go do the thing that you know. Go do the familiar thing, right? So when it comes to whether it's shopping or drugs or binge eating or emotional eating or alcohol, it doesn't really matter what the thing is, right? Your brain's always going to be the one thing that says, "No, do the thing you know," because then it doesn't have to work hard, right? Your brain is inherently lazy, right? And that's a fact. It doesn't want to do any more than it's already got to do. Your brain's already doing a shit ton of stuff, right? It's keeping you alive. It's being aware of the absolute millions of pieces of information that are being hit by your brain, via your eyes, via your ears, that are coming to you every hour and every single day. It's got to keep your heart going. It's got to keep your brain functioning. It's got to keep your lymphatic system going. It's got to keep your liver working. It's got to be aware of so many things when you're walking, when you're out on the road, when you're on your computer. It's flipping busy, is your brain. So if it can do stuff on a daily basis that it's used to doing, it's going to take that option, right? Because it's kind of like, yeah, do you know what? I can't be bothered to be conscious. You've probably heard this. 95% of everything that we do and think is totally automatic or unconscious, right? And that's because we keep on repeating it. We're not consciously aware of the thoughts that we think until it comes to trying to change things. And then guess what? Those are the thoughts that we're always thinking about. So if I'm thinking about not drinking, I'm still thinking drinking. If I'm thinking about what time can I drink, or how little can I drink, or how many days is it until I'm allowed a drink, if you're on that restrictive path, you are still thinking and talking about drinking. In other words, it's this big, right? And we want it to be this big. In my case, it doesn't even exist at all, thankfully, because I know that I am much happier, much healthier without it. It's a poison, right? And I can know that on a knowing level. I knew it when I was drinking, right? And I'm one of these people who did all of the online tests to see what kind of a drinker are you, and what kind of a personality are you, and what's the best option for you to reduce. Take this quiz. I did all of those, right? And they all basically try and get you to do the same sort of stuff. But the problem is you're still thinking drinking. And when I'm talking drinking here, I'm also talking food, right? Because the process is exactly the same. It's stuff that your body ingests. It goes inside, it has to get broken down. And that has an effect on your gut microbiome. It has an effect on your mood, on your emotions, on your neurotransmitters, how you function as a whole being. And again, if you followed any of my stuff, read any of my blogs, I am somebody who talks about health, as in from the top of here down to your feet, not chopping you off at the neck. And for those of you listening, I put my hand on top of my head. From the top of your head to the bottom of your feet, you are a whole person. You're not separate parts. You're not separately chopped off with your head doing one thing and the body doing another. Everything connects. And this is where understanding that we have got much more power than we think if we understand how we actually function and how we work. And if we keep saying things like, oh God, change is hard and I can't give up, that's a horrible term, then of course you're going to want to do the thing that you've given up, because the words that we choose to use have so much power. Think about it. If you're giving something up, what does it sound like? It kind of sounds like it's something that you want to pick back up again, right? It sounds like something that I kind of still want to do, but I'm not doing it because I think that I shouldn't, or because other people think that I shouldn't, or because it's not good for me. Whereas if I say, I don't, it's pretty finite, right? I don't drink, end of story. And if anybody asks me why, I just go, don't suit me. It's as simple as that. I don't go into any more reasons like, oh, I've been in recovery for years and I used to. Well, no one cares. It's not interesting, right? In and of that situation, it's totally irrelevant. Would you like an alcoholic drink? No, thanks. Oh, do you not drink? No. Why not? It doesn't suit me. Okay, what can I get you? It's that simple. People get bogged down with it. Same thing with food. I have shared that I have discovered through, and I talk about this in the chapter of the book as well, through various blood tests, that I've got something called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And because of that, often when you get one autoimmune issue, it leads to others. So I've got Sjogren's along for the ride, and also now rheumatoid arthritis is kicking in too. So are these things that I have got the power to change? Well, I can't actually stop an autoimmune disease. I can't completely reverse it. But what I can do is manage it. And again, this is the power to change. I can change how I think about this. I can be a victim to it and I can feel sorry for myself. No, it's a consequence of my behavior, my thinking, and what I did with food, how I punished my body, how much I drank, and stress. Right. And that's just a fact. Now, I can either feel, oh, woe is me about it, which gets me nowhere and actually makes things worse faster, or I can choose to make changes that I need to make. And this is where I come back to, is it hard? Well, only if I decide it's going to be. So there are certain foods that are inflammatory and just are a no-no if you've got any kind of leaky gut issues and if you've got any autoimmune issues. And people can argue with me, oh, there isn't the research and the science to prove it. Actually, there's tons now that is showing this. But is it as black and white as do not eat this if you've got an autoimmune issue? No, it's not that black and white, but then no research study is. However, Try it yourself. That's what I say to most people. Do you know what? Just have a go. But there are certain things that I know will cause my gut massive issues, and the knock-on effect will be that it feels like my symptoms are getting much, much worse. Is that down to me? Yes. Is it because I decided to not stick to what I know works best for me? Yes. Was that a choice? Yes. Can I change it? Yes, I can. In fact, here's the thing, only I can. And that's what I want to finish this podcast on. It's called The Power to Change because we all have that power. We all might not know exactly what steps to take in the right order for us. And this is where asking for help, asking for guidance and support is the most important thing to do. Do I always recommend that you go and get guidance and support from somebody who's been where you have been and has then gotten out of it and come through? Yeah, of course. Whether we're talking business, whether we're talking finances, it doesn't really matter. If you're going to go for any help or support, then it makes sense that you would go to somebody who has gotten over the same issues as you and is thriving. It just makes sense, doesn't it? And that's what I did. I went to other people who had gotten through Hashimoto's and other autoimmune issues and said, hey, what do I do? How do I manage this? It also helped me to recognize that some of the reasons why I struggled with my emotional eating, with binge eating, and with my moods and my depression was very much about me not understanding how my body worked and understanding just what foods did in terms of the gut microbiome and the neurotransmitters. Now I understand all that. That's why I created the BLAST method, because it incorporates all of those things. But crucially, it's the language. It is so, so important. So we all have the power to change. And if we change the words that we choose to use, we can change how we feel about things. And how we feel about things is usually the most powerful driver to our behaviors. So we say everything begins with a thought, but actually everything begins with a feeling. Feelings leads to thoughts. And the thoughts then can take us to a behavior pattern that is helpful or one that is harmful. Now, thankfully for me, I had that compulsion to use alcohol removed on that incredible bank holiday weekend back in 2005. And I am forever grateful to the universe for that. But it didn't make my journey straightforward. I still had many, many, many other issues to deal with. And today I still do. They're just different. And that's what I want to share with you. You can choose the path that you take, and it can be hard if you want it to be, but we all have the power to change. And so my invitation to you is, why not take the path of least resistance? Why not make it easier by changing the language, your attitude, and the steps that you take in the order that you take them, so that you're working with you and not against you. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you next time.